We are on the quest to find the ultimate focaccia recipe, so I tested 9 in one day and we're gonna discuss. I collected more than 25 recipes looking for unique ingredients and methods that would help the bread rise to the top, and let me tell you, it was a journey. If you're new to focaccia, it's a yeasted Italian flatbread that's really simple. It typically just includes flour, water, yeast, salt, and olive oil, but where things get tricky is the rising time. So I actually coordinated this bake-off over the course of 2 days to accommodate for all of the different rising times. In order to judge each focaccia, I assessed them on 3 factors, so taste, texture, and overall eating experience. And for this bake-off, I recruited 36 tasters from around New York City to help judge each focaccia. So if you're new here, my name is Erika and I'm the Pancake Princess. I have curated over 90 bake-offs in the past 7 years on my blog, which averages 250,000 views per month. I was laid off from my full-time job about 1.5 years ago and took the leap into full-time food blogging. I'm so grateful to be doing this and I'm so excited you're here with me. But this focaccia is not going to bake itself, so let's get into it. So starting in the order that I baked the focaccia, we have Samin Nosrat, which is a really easy and famous recipe. So it starts by mixing together the flour, water, salt, yeast, and a tiny bit of honey to help activate the yeast. It gets fermented for 12 to 14 hours at room temperature. And then what makes this really special is a saltwater brine that is literally just salt and water poured over the focaccia before you bake it to help the salt evenly disperse throughout the bread. So let's take a taste. Right off the bat, Samin's bread really has strong olive oil notes, and there's a ton of olive oil that goes in the bottom of the pan, on top of the pan, and that flavor really comes through in the focaccia, as does the salt. So the salt brine really does a good job of soaking throughout the entire bread and giving you this nice salty olive oily flavor. I think for me, the focaccia is nice and chewy, and when it was fresh, there was less of a distinction between a really crispy crust and chewy interior compared to some. But overall, I think it's a really strong focaccia in terms of flavor. Texture-wise, I wish it was a little more like open and holy, but this is a certain style of focaccia where, has kind of a tight crumb. You have some bigger bubbles, but it's not as holy and moist as others. Next, we have a bread by Alexandra Cooks, and this is a no-knead bread very similar to Samin, but instead of letting it ferment at room temperature, you ferment the dough overnight for up to 3 days, and then once you take it out of the fridge, you'll let it rise for 3 to 4 hours before baking it off. So let's take a taste. If you've ever tried Alexandra's peasant bread, this feels very similar. To me, it is clearly more open and bubbly compared to the crumb in Samin's focaccia. Overall, it has like a very rough, chewy, coarse, kind of open, airy crumb. It's a little rougher and slightly drier than some others. Overall, I thought the salt balance was really good, but the overall flavor was a little middle of the road. So for the amount of effort that goes into this bread, I think this is really delicious. And if you want kind of a hands-off recipe that's going to give you a pretty good focaccia, this is an excellent recipe. Most of these focaccia recipes are northern style, but we have one exception, and that is Recipe Eats, which is technically a southern style focaccia, which has potato incorporated into the dough. Now, I know that's not quite fair to compare this to the rest of the focaccias, but I thought it would be interesting. So this recipe calls for boiling and mashing potato and then incorporating it to the dough. You can see there's a little bit of a gummy texture in the focaccia, and I think that is baker's error because I don't have a potato ricer. So when I was trying to kind of smash the mashed potato along the wall of the bowl the way the recipe suggests, I don't think I incorporated it as smoothly as you're supposed to, but it's still baked up, it was edible, so let's try it. Because I had 36 other tasters who judged these focaccias, I know that not everyone agrees with me, but I kind of loved how soft and a little bit sweet this focaccia was. There's definitely more sugar in this recipe compared to others, which I assumed was to help activate the yeast, but it's more than like a teaspoon. I think it's 4 teaspoons total, which kind of gives the bread a hint of sweetness that is really unexpected for a focaccia. And I love the moisture, the tenderness that the potatoes add to the dough. This was by far the most unique focaccia that we tried, and honestly, it's the one that I kept going back to because it's just so moist. Like, I would rather have moist bread compared to dry bread, and it just has a nice mouthfeel, really good flavor, very potatoey. I don't know if this is my first choice for like a sandwich, but if I'm just eating focaccia plain, it's kind of like a cakey bread, which I love. Next up, we have Grateful Pizza, which is a recipe that an influencer developed, I believe, based on the Bon Appetit recipe. And this recipe is quite similar, but has a little less water and requires 4 folds over the course of an hour to help develop the structure. And it also requires an overnight rest. The first thing that stood out to me with this recipe is the really gorgeous golden exterior. This was the first recipe of the focaccias that had that kind of plush, holy interior that I really want to see those big air bubbles in focaccia. And so this had a really nice texture, really crunchy exterior, so like a big contrast, which I loved. The only thing that I didn't love is the flavor felt a little lackluster, so that could be me not putting enough olive oil or salt perhaps, because the recipe doesn't specify exactly how much olive oil to use. If you want a slightly different texture from the Bon Appetit no-knead bread, this is a great one to try because you really just get what I feel like is like an artisanal focaccia texture. Coincidentally, next up we have the Bon Appetit no-knead focaccia. So this recipe is very similar to Alexandra Cooks in that you mix it, you put it in the fridge for up to a day. The next day you take it out, proof it, bake it. And it looks really cute. Now it's kind of hard to tell because this focaccia is not fresh and we only have a little slice, but this looked really classic coming out of the oven to me in terms of kind of the color that was happening on top. There's a really nice kind of fine bubbly texture to the crumb itself, which is very different from Grateful Pizza, which is very similar but has more of like an open holy texture. There's also, you can see that both of them have like a nice golden bottom that was really crisp right after being baked. Somehow to me, the Bon Appetit recipe has a really nice olive oil forward flavor that I didn't get as much in the Grateful Pizza recipe. However, the texture of this is much more soft, chewy. I don't know, there's just more of like an even bready texture versus Grateful Pizza. Again, has those big bubbles, stretchy, chewy, more artisanal. So both great recipes, just a matter of do you want easy and softer or a little more work and more textural interest. We've had a lot of no-knead recipes so far, and Sally's Baking Addiction is the first recipe that calls for kneading the dough. So you can either do this in a stand mixer or by hand for about 5 minutes. This was also an interesting recipe because she calls for letting the dough rise, you shape it, and then you ferment it for up to 24 hours in the fridge, as opposed to most doughs, you mix it, let it ferment, then shape and bake. So this is what it looks like. A little paler than others. Texturally, Sally's focaccia really stands out to me because it is significantly more bready than the rest of the focaccias, and I don't really know how to describe that except that it reminds me more of like a sandwich bread than a slab of focaccia. And not to say that that's a bad thing because it's really soft. It was a tiny bit drier than some of the other crumbs, pretty moist when it was freshly baked, but overall, it's a really interesting study. Like, I think this would make an excellent sandwich because it just has that tight crumb and like breadiness. I think it would soak up sauces really well. But if you're looking for like a really holy focaccia that has a really crisp, crackly top, really crisp bottom, and kind of like an airy structure, this probably isn't the focaccia for you. But if you like a breadier texture, this is excellent. Next, we have one of the recipes that I was most excited to try. This is King Arthur's Pain de Cristal bread, but shaped into focaccia. And so this is a 100% hydration bread, which means that there is an equal part of flour to water. High hydration breads usually mean that the crumb is really moist, which I personally love. That means you'll never find a dry loaf. And Pain de Cristal is a type of bread characteristic to the Catalan region, which it's very distinctive. When you see it, you'll know there's like big holes really brown, thin, crisp crust. And so was really excited to see how it would play out in focaccia. Like, would it be similar to the others? Would it be super different? Would it taste good? Would the texture be good? So let's try it. Okay, quite different from the rest of the focaccias, but in a good way. I think that this crumb is noticeably more moist. There's almost like a silky quality to it when the amount of moisture just makes these little, like, it almost looks like a croissant, but there's such giant air holes, and like the thin layers of gluten that are formed in between the air holes just have this like silky, moist, delicious bread quality. When this was fresh, the crust was so crackly and just so crunchy and delicious. The bottom was also really crunchy and delicious. So this is an incredible piece of bread. Is it a traditional focaccia? I feel like it's a little holier than focaccia should be, but I really enjoyed it. I think this would be excellent for dipping, sandwiches, like any way that you want to eat bread. The only thing about this recipe is that it requires 2 hours of hands-on time. You do a lot of coil folds and a bowl fold, and it's just a little more work than your average recipe. Like, you can't leave the house and just like throw it in your fridge for 24 hours. You have to sit there and like fold it every 20 minutes or so for 2 hours, and then let it rise, and then let it bake. So a little labor intensive, but overall I think this is a really unique recipe that's worth trying. Next, we have a focaccia by Joshua Weissman, and this recipe stood out to me because A, he uses a little bit of whole wheat flour, B, he calls for a lot of kneading. It's around 25 minutes total, so while you could do it by hand, I would probably use a stand mixer because that's just a lot of kneading. It would probably take even longer by hand. And it calls for one of the longest fermentation times, so 48 to 72 hours. So this focaccia has had some rave reviews online, and I was excited to try it. This focaccia has some nice big air pockets and smaller bubbles, so kind of similar to Alexandra Cooks, but slightly smaller air bubbles overall. Overall, I was a little disappointed in this. I thought that the whole wheat flour would add a little more of like a nutty flavor, and I thought the long fermentation time would add more flavor overall, but the flavor didn't really stand out to me. I do think this is a really nice chewy bread. It had a nice crunchy bottom, but overall it didn't really stand out to me. And I think for the amount of kneading that went into this recipe and the amount of fermentation time, I don't know if it would be my top choice to make again. And lastly, we are ending with Claire Saffitz's recipe. And Claire's recipe, similar to Joshua Weissman, recalls for a lot of kneading. I don't remember how many minutes exactly, but you do have to knead it for, I want to say it's like 7 to 10 minutes on high in your mixer. And I actually thought I broke my mixer because it was like slowing down by the end of the 10 or 15 minutes or whatever it was. Because you're really trying to develop this really strong gluten. Like the way she holds up the dough in her YouTube video, you can tell that a lot of gluten has been developed. And if you don't mix it on high, which I made that mistake the first time I tried this dough, you'll end up with kind of a soupy mess. So make sure that you're mixing it on high. And then before baking, Claire also incorporates a few folds into the dough, which helps strengthen the gluten. So overall, an interesting recipe, and let's try it. Okay, when I tried this focaccia for the first time, I was like, this is the ultimate iconic focaccia. It has, the texture is a little thinner because of the pan I baked it in, but the crust looks nice and golden. It's not quite as golden as like Grateful Pizza, but it's much more golden compared to some of the other focaccias that, for whatever reason, didn't brown as much. Although Claire does call for baking this on the top rack for several minutes to get more color. I think that the texture of the inside is the perfect balance of being a little bit holy, a little bit bready. The flavor, the salt is well distributed throughout, very similar to Samin, but it doesn't call for that saltwater brine. The olive oil flavor is very prominent and distinct. Overall, I really thought this was like a very classic focaccia. Like when I think of focaccia, this is the flavor, the texture, the color that I want to see. I think this would make a great sandwich, my benchmark. I do have the taster results from all 37 tasters, including me, and this is who they crown the crowd favorite. So in third place, we have King Arthur with their 100% hydration Pan de Cristal. In second place, we have the Bon Appetit No Need Focaccia. And in first place, we have Queen Claire Saffitz with her very kneading heavy focaccia. But honestly, I thought it was iconic. Clearly the rest of the tasters did too. So a really great classic if you're looking to make focaccia. Now, I will say that my personal preference doesn't always align with what the tasters voted on. In this case, it is fairly aligned. So my personal favorite, if I was going purely for taste, not thinking about effort, I would probably make Claire Saffitz's focaccia or King Arthur's. Both I think are a little bit finicky in terms of the amount of kneading and folds and hands-on time compared to the others, but I think both are extremely delicious. Claire's I think is just a little more classic, whereas King Arthur, maybe I would make this if I was really in the mood for like a really, I can't stop saying this, a really moist focaccia with like a really soft crumb. But then if I was going for like least effort, highest payoff, I think I would go for Bon Appetit. I truly think that the whole mixing, throwing it in the fridge method is just so easy, so low effort, but you get a really amazing payoff that tastes great, looks great, texture is amazing. So that would be my pick for low effort. And then lastly, I don't know when, like, I'm struggling to think of an occasion where I would make this potato focaccia. I think just to eat for fun, like with pasta or something, it would be delicious. But I'm truthfully obsessed with this potato focaccia and I am dying to make it again. I think it is so good. It's so moist and potatoey and just delicious. And so even though this recipe did not score that well on the overall taster rankings, I encourage you to give it a try if you think you might like just a little bit of sweetness. Like you get that sweet, salty balance, and that like potato texture is just so satisfying. If you make it correctly, you probably won't get the gummy lines that I did. But in any case, those are my favorites. I hope you enjoyed this review of all 9 focaccia recipes that I baked and ate in one day in order to find the ultimate focaccia. Let me know in the comments what bake-off you'd like to see next. I'm always looking for ideas for upcoming bake-offs. You can read the full analysis and find all of the taster rankings on my blog at thepancakeprincess.com, and hope to see you next time.